All right. Hi, everyone. I will be going over the conductive zone of the respiratory system with you today. So as I'm sure you know, the respiratory system is made up of two different zones. We have the conductive zone and the respiratory zone. The conductive zone is going to move air through the body down to the respiratory zone. And in the respiratory zone is where gas exchange is going to occur. In the conductive zone, which I'm going to go through with you today, there's no gas exchange. This is simply where air is going to be transported and humidified, warmed up, and cleaned before reaching the respiratory zone, so that when it reaches the respiratory zone, the air is all ready for gas exchange. So I'm going to be going through the list of words on page 298 in your lab manual. Before we get into that, here is a picture of the different landmarks that air is going to pass through in the conductive zone. So you will need to know this order, and you will need to know the order of the epithelial tissues that are found in each landmark. So here would be, the order of the landmarks, and then below it is listed the order of the different epithelial tissues. And that will be covered in a different video, but I just wanted to mention that you'll need to know both of those. So if we look at the list of words on page 298, this is going to help you fill out the diagram on page 304 in your manual. I like to use this picture here to go through the different landmarks. So first we have the nasal vestibule, which is essentially just the nostrils. So that's going to be right here, and that is where air is going to enter in and make its way into the nasal cavity here. In the nasal cavity, we have nasal conchae, and these are going to be the areas that stick out into the cavity. You have 3 of them here. And the folds that are underneath these conchae, that is going to be the nasal meatus or meati. So the part that sticks out is the conchae, and the folds underneath are the meatus. And those are found in the nasal cavity, and they help create turbulence with the air that we breathe in to warm up that air before it makes its way into the throat. The throat is also known as the pharynx, and there are 3 different regions you'll need to know. Let me scoot this over. So we have the nasopharynx found right here behind the nasal cavity. We have the oropharynx found behind the oral cavity, and the laryngopharynx found behind the larynx. So now let's look at the larynx. This picture looks very similar to the diagrams in your lab manual on page 304. So I would suggest filling that out while we go through this here. So when air moves through the pharynx, it then hits the larynx, and this whole region here is the larynx. You should recognize the thyroid gland here from the endocrine system, and that can kind of help you orient yourself here. So right above the thyroid gland is the cricoid cartilage. It's this first ring on the anterior view here, and in the posterior view, it's much larger. I believe it's gray, a light gray in your diagram. Yeah. So then right here, we have the thyroid cartilage, which gets its name from the thyroid gland here. So it's that really large, smooth looking cartilage on the anterior view. Over on the posterior view again, we have the arytenoid cartilage, which are these larger triangles that kind of sit on top of the cricoid cartilage. And then on top of that, we have the corniculate cartilage. And those are those tiny little triangles that kind of look like corn that sit on top of the arytenoid cartilage. So in your lab manual, there are those tiny little triangles that kind of like curve at the end. And again, this is in the posterior view. Then we have the epiglottis, which looks kind of like a big leaf sticking out in the posterior view in your lab manual. And you can kind of see it sticking out here in the anterior view as well. Let's see. So if you were to look down someone's throat, if you were looking down this hole right here, this is how it would look. This hole here is called the glottis. And right above it, we have the epiglottis here, which we just went over. So the glottis is the hole that air is going to travel through, and the epiglottis is there to protect the glottis and make sure that no food is going to enter in the glottis and get down to the lungs. So now on each side of the glottis, we have the vocal cords. We have one right here, and we have one right here. And then down here, these bumps, that is going to be that corniculate cartilage again. So if you were to imagine you're looking down this right here, this is where the glottis would be, with the epiglottis kind of above it and the corniculate cartilage below it. And then right here's that hole. So that is what you're seeing right here. And this superior view is also in your lab manual. Okay, so once you move through the larynx, air is now in the trachea. So let's look at this picture here. And then let's see. Here's another superior view where you have the glottis and the vocal cords. Here they're open and here they're closed. And then here is another picture. So this hole, this tiny hole right here, that would be the glottis. And up here's the epiglottis. That's going to protect the glottis. All right, so air moves through the larynx and into the trachea here. You need to know two things for the trachea. This point right here is the carina, and then you'll need to know the trachealis muscle, which you can only see in the posterior view. And if you look at the diagram in your manual on page 304, in the posterior view, it's going to be that dark, kind of smooth looking muscle that's running vertically. So the trachealis muscle runs along the back side of the trachea. All right, now let's talk about the bronchi here. So you're going to have three different sets of bronchi: primary, secondary, and tertiary. I like to use, let's see, this picture right here. So here's the carina, and this first split right here gives us the right and left primary bronchi, or bronchus, since there's two of them. As you continue to move down, after this second major split here, we are then in the secondary bronchi. And you continue to move down after this third major split, we're in the tertiary bronchi. Bronchioles are pretty much smaller branches of the bronchi. So as you continue to move down the branches, you see these smaller splits here. Those are bronchioles. And then finally, at the very end, you come to the terminal bronchioles, and these are going to be attached to alveolar sacs. So once you reach an alveolar sac, you're no longer in the conductive zone. That is the start of the respiratory zone. So this terminal bronchiole right here, that is the end of the line for the conductive zone. So let's go back to this picture here, and we can go through the order of the conductive zone. So we went through the nasal vestibulae, or the nostrils, move into the nasal cavity, move through the nasopharynx and the oropharynx of the throat. Then we hit the larynx, move down into the trachea, move through the bronchi. We have our primary, secondary, and tertiary bronchi. Then we move into those smaller branches, or the bronchioles. And finally, we hit the terminal bronchioles. So that is everything you need to know for the conductive zone. You need to know this order, as well as all of those landmarks that I just went through with you on page 298 and 299. And of course, you need to know the different epithelial tissues as well that are a part of the conductive zone, but you'll learn about that in a different video. So I hope this was helpful to everyone, and thank you for listening.